Hey there, everybody. It's your friend Stephen Kellogg. I'm here with my friend James Campion. Uh, is that I'm going to turn off my mail. I'll do that again.
Yeah, I think I should do the same thing. Hold on. Uno momento, por favor. Got that out of the way fast.
Yeah.
This is every one of our lives these days, though. Dogs go running through the screen in important meetings. What are you going to do?
Yeah. 100%.
All right. I don't think I get updates on that. Okay. Did I lose you?
Me?
Oh, got it. I'm back.
All right.
Is good?
Good to go. Looks good.
All right.
Hey there, everybody. It is your friend Stephen Kellogg. I'm here with my friend James Campion, one of the first authors I got to know in the flesh, in person. I got to pick his brain. He was a huge help through the process of writing my new book, which comes out July 7th, Objects in the Mirror, Thoughts on a Perfect Life from an Imperfect Person. James has it. I have it. James's most recent book is Something Like a Martyr, The Tortured Life of Warren Zevon. Did I get that name correctly?
Accidentally.
Accidentally Like a Martyr. I know. I was trying to operate from memory, and I knew it would fail me. So that is James's most recent book. But the book that I first read of James's, which was near and dear to my heart, was Shout It Out Loud, the story of Kiss's Destroyer and the making of an American icon. James has written a ton of books, and we'll talk more on all that. But thank you for tuning in for a little author-to-author chat. How you doing, James? What's going on?
I'm doing well. You're looking good, buddy. How's the family? Everybody's good?
We're doing good, man. We're doing as good as folks. It's the Wild West, but we're doing good. We're hanging it, and I'm grateful to have a big family of nice people that I live with. So,
Yeah.
You in Jersey, I sent you a copy of the book, and it took. I think you reached out about 5 weeks later and said, "Hey, did you get a chance to send that book?" And we live an hour and a half apart. 2 hours max apart.
Yeah.
But it arrived.
It did, and then you sent me another one, and I got the first one. You're like, hey, I think that's the first one. So that was great. So I got 2 copies. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Well, you deserve more for all the help you gave me obviously so many times in this process, I was like, James, how does this go?
Yeah, that's my favorite story. I tell people that all the time. When I first met you, the first words out of your mouth after you asked me if you're a writer, because that's how Adam Duritz, a mutual friend of ours from Counting Crows, I'm working on a book with him, and we were in the midst of it when you came to his place for a basketball game or movie night or something he always has over there. And after you had gotten wind that I was a writer, you're like, okay, how do you write a book? Which, when you asked me that question, it wasn't like rhetorical. You were like, how do you break it down? That's why I love talking to you now, having gone through this, and your honesty, not only in this book, but in so many emails that we shared about the difficulty of it, the discipline of it, the journey through it. And I just want to say off the top, I am just so proud of you. Anybody who goes to that journey of writing a book, I call it the blank page fever. Now I guess we call it the flashing cursor fever, where you look at it and you got to fill those pages, and it's a lot of work. So you should be really proud of yourself. I've commented on the book. I'm lucky enough to have a blurb on the back. It's very well done. I hear your voice. The stories are great. It's very personal and honest, and I just love it. Thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank you, brother. Well, I really couldn't have done it without you, man. You were a steady voice throughout the process, because there's so many moments in writing that I thought, is this okay? Is this how? There's no way that a good writer or a good book could ever be in this stage that I'm in right now. Like this, and you read about people talk about hating writing or something, you'll read Elizabeth Gilbert, charmingly comment on how hard it is. And you kind of think, you just think they're being charming about it. You just don't realize that they're actually hating it or actually feeling like maybe they've got a complete miss on their hands, and And really, I have a handful. I mean, I count on one hand the authors that I sort of interact with regularly. And because of, your Underwater Sunshine podcast that you do with Adam, we kept running into each other at just the right times, and I would be in a new phase, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I think I might have blown it, and you're sort of knowingly smile, and I appreciate that. So,
well, the one thing I remember saying to you, I think it might have been on the road. I saw you on the road in Connecticut when I went with Counting Crows as that part of my book research. It was so great seeing you. It was we stopped at different places, seeing people that I had met prior was really nice touchstones on the road.
Yeah.
And I remember telling you, and this is true of any author, and maybe you can concur with this, but I always feel like the book reveals itself to you as a book eventually. So those moments that you had of doubt, those moments of like, this is a mishmash of shit, I don't know how this works, how a reader will enjoy this. And that's why I've always had I've had great editors in my lifetime that really helped me get back. So when I had those moments of doubt, I think I mentioned to you, it doesn't matter, keep writing, because eventually it'll go, oh, this is the book I want to do. And I could tell you arrived on that when you did it in sections and in two parts. These are things most important to me, and these are other things that are also important, but not as important. I love that you did that in the book. That's what I'm doing now in a project I'm working on. That's what I had to do with Adam's book that I finished the first draft of, and I did in the books that you mentioned.
So do you know,
until then,
you've now written, you have several books, 6, 7?
7, yeah.
Where does that moment where you can, how much are you aware of the structure going in? Like how much of that do you know now that you know kind of how this goes?
Well, I should ask you, because I don't want this just to be an interview, because I'm dying to talk to you about your
No,
project.
I know.
Did you know?
No.
Did you know first?
No, I didn't. And I kind of had the first chapter on marriage and maybe the intro. I had an editor who came into the picture very early, Carol Stanley, and she had me just working on the intro and the marriage chapter. And I had all these other scraps of things, rock and roll road stories and thoughts for my daughters. I had all these things, but I didn't have any kind of structure. But I did think, well, I want to write a chapter that's basically about marriage. And so I had that, but I had no other concept. And it was only when I kind of got that chapter in place that it kind of started to go, oh, maybe this is a little bit of a life well lived, essays on a life well lived is the format. But I still felt, I'll be honest, I thought, who the hell am I to tell someone, this is how to live your life? Well, I felt like I got a good running start in life. My parents, I grew up in the middle class, and I was always leery of trying to do anything that felt too self-helpy. So I didn't know. I was like, am I really going to write this book? But then that structure revealed itself.
There you go.
So I started doing it.
Right.
And then it was just about trying to put enough to really just to be honest about the places I've gone wrong too, so that it didn't feel like I didn't want it to be a recipe for a life well lived, because I yell at my kids, I fight with my wife. I mean, I fail so regularly that I just couldn't write a book like that.
Right. I forgave you immediately for your thoughts on A Perfect Life from an Imperfect Person subtitle, because sometimes I always get into it with authors, kids who I speak to sometimes about creative writing. Never apologize as you're doing it, because we're all narcissistic, insulated, solipsistic people when we sit down to write. Who cares what I think about Warren Zevon? I had a huge battle with Jackson Browne during the writing of that book, because it's like, he hates when people dissect and deconstruct songs. But you know me, Stephen. That's what I do. I did it with your songs. We did interviews.
I'm doing that too. I mean, and it's great. Why not?
Yeah. So some people have a different viewpoint of that, right? So, but I feel like you have to have that brashness, that boldness, that gets you through, because of course nobody cares, really, if you think about it. What any art we do, why would anyone care, right? Those are those moments of doubt that a lot of people look. Elton John had it. Paul McCartney had it. you hear John and Paul talk all the time. This is the Beatles, for crying out loud. They had those moments of like, are people gonna like this? I mean,
Yeah.
Hemingway had it. Nobody ever, I don't care how big you are, you're at some points when you're creating something, it's going to creep in. So I think it was perfectly natural for you.
Well, and I did realize at one point, I called my editor and I said, I can't qualify, because I'm like, I'm trying to write about marriage in a way that speaks to every marriage. I mean, at some point it got a little too overwhelming of like, I'm not your expert on multiple marriages. I understand that people get divorced. My parents were divorced. I have thoughts on it, but it doesn't really, what I started to eventually embrace was I'm going to write about what I know. And I'm going to leave open the door that, yeah, I'm sure there are other things, but the voice of, the exception to the rule would always be in my head while I was writing it. And I think there were places that was good, but there were also places where it was just getting in my way, where the book was starting to read like a giant list of qualifications, of like, and I know that, and if you're a same-sex couple, it's different for you. And if you're divorced, but it's kind of like, look, I'm going to write about what it's like to be in a marriage that works as I understand it, and that has to be enough. So I kind of got there, but I still worry about it. I do.
So, just to get back to your original question, or what we originally started talking about, which is mapping everything out and then coming to the list of things that you did. Yes and no for me, because obviously when you write a book about the making of a record like I did with Destroyer, I knew I wanted to interview Bob Ezrin. So I wanted the story to be about Bob, the producer of that record, who I loved and grew up with it, expanded my imagination. And I used that record and Bob as both a balancing act. So I knew I wanted to do that. With the Zevon book, just like your book, is a series of essays. So I wrote the first essay, sent it to my editor, and she was like, this is a good idea, do another one. So I was like, okay, that motivated me. So I did another one, and then she says, how would you arc it? So I wasn't sure as I was writing the essays where they would actually go. I was just writing them. I want to write about this song. And then eventually I realized it's really a story about the songwriter's life, about Warren Zevon's life, but in the context of songwriting. And as Adam has told me many times in the work that we're doing on his book, songwriting, and you'd be able to attest to this as well, is a mythos of your life. It's not a diary. It's
right.
You mytholize the things that happen to you, and you do it in a poetic sense. So people hear a line, like some of the beautiful stuff that you have in Objects in the Mirror, which have in the context of metaphor, are beautiful, viewpoints of death and life and memory and love and marriage. I've talked to you many times about how I love how you use the dress, what your wife was wearing when you met her, and then when she got married. Just stuff like that comes later on. So I was able to build out the book in that way. Yeah. And that made it. And then once I realized that, that's why I said it revealed itself to me. And almost all my books do.
And do you have any where you go in and you just know in advance, like this is gonna be the arc, and you just know what it's gonna look like ahead of time?
Well, only nonfiction or fiction book. My one fiction book, why I did it, I had to map it out because it was a plot. So, but when I start a new project, I want to learn from the people I'm interviewing. I go in with an idea. This is this. And then I'm throwing a curveball every time. Someone gives me an interview and says, no. This happened, and then that happened. And if that doesn't happen, this happens. So even in the context of writing the essays, I was interviewing, Waddy Wachtel and Jackson Browne and J.D. Souther and all these guys who were right there in the room for a lot of these songs, or knew these people. And they would say, whoa, no, this happened. And then that's why he wrote it that way. And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm learning it. And I'm passing it on to you as the
yeah.
It's hard to map it out when you're learning a new thing as well,
Yeah. Well, I definitely, when I do get back to writing another book, whenever that happens, and I think it will, despite.
Can I just say something? Maybe my favorite line of the entire book is when your daughter asks you, "Hey, Dad, you gonna write another book?" And you said, "I might. I hope not." She says.
I know.
That pretty much says it all, man. I'm telling you.
It was so funny. I mean, and I hear it But I think, you know, it's like records. Every record I've ever made, I say, well, I'm just going to do this one last record. That's how I've been since high school. You know, I'm going to do one more record and then I'm out. Like it's literally, and I'm an overeater, you know, which I talk about in the book, but that's how I am with food too. It's like, I get too full and I'm never going to eat again. But it's amazing, shocking how hungry you get. And I find myself already kind of kicking around ideas. And I think it'll be, maybe this is the delusional side. It's not that it'll be easier. I'll just know more. I'll have been there before a little bit. And I think I'll know to be looking for the arc and knowing that that's like, once you get the arc, that's like, oh, good. Now I can sort of just do the work and slot my chapters in. And then the chapters will look this way and maybe they won't all make it, but you just understand the process more once you've done it, you know?
Yeah. The fortunate thing for me, and that's why I have no problem ever reaching out. I've talked to people all the time. I try not to read anybody's work while they're doing it because I always had the back of my mind, you know, what if subconsciously I pick something up and then 5 years from now, someone says I stole it for them. So I'm very, very careful. If it's a really good friend and I get to know them like yourself, right, or something like that. But for the most part, I get a lot of stuff. And the only thing I ever tell people is I was really fortunate. I did research for the great baseball writer Roger Kahn of Boys of Summer fame. And Roger taught me a great deal and answered all my questions, although a lot of it was like he was going out of his way to do it. But he always did, you know, and whenever I had a chance to meet an author or sit down with my heroes like Hunter Thompson, always gave me his time. And Hunter, of course, is known as the gonzo journalist, crazy man, drugs, violence. But once he knew you were a writer, all that bullshit went away. It was two guys like you and me talking about the craft, about the discipline, about the rewriting. Writing is rewriting. All the things that I learned in school, all the ones that teachers told me, writing is rewriting, and I love having written, but I hate have written or writing, or all those things, those tropes. So when someone like yourself is going through that, I feel the pain, and I respect what you're going through. And I will say, you will have an easier time the second time, because just like anything else, once you go through that fire, there is a sense of like, okay, last time I did this, and it cost me 2 weeks. I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. Well, I look, you know, I'm excited. We're going to get there. And I
you have an idea?
I got I got two things cooking right now that could be something, you know. I don't have any desire, not even a little, to like attack it at this moment in time, because I feel pretty overwhelmed by, you know, what life is doing. And I want to do it when I want to jump in the water when I can run a little bit and get a little distance between me and the beginning of the process, you know?
Right.
But right now it's just journaling. It's kicking. I keep making notes, and I think, you know, this year it might present itself, but right now we just did the 3 months of virtual tour dates. We're going to do a bunch more in the fall, and I want to log some hours with my kids and kind of just like breathe. I want to get hungry again, you know?
Right. Yeah. I'm bummed that you and I couldn't do this live on stage in Boston and New York like you and I talked about over the winter, because I would have loved to look in the faces of the people who read the book or getting ready to get it or love you as an artist. Because that's the one thing my publishers are always telling me, don't do these book signings. You sell like 5 books, 8 books. It's a waste of your money and your time. And I'm like, it's such an isolating experience. What you do, being on stage, people cheering when you're done with a song, is like, hey, nice job. You touched me. Great job.
Right.
Like, it's excellent getting stuff through Amazon or stuff through my website or stuff through Facebook. When just yesterday, someone wrote, hey, I just finished this book of yours. I relived my childhood. I thought it was beautifully written. It was a real treat.
That
filled me with such joy. But to get that back is, you know, I'm always envious of you guys to play on stage, you know?
I know. I'm grateful for it too. I mean, because of the ways that people contact me through music, I have been able to hear about more people who've read it. You know, I feel like I'm able to get more of the feedback, and the feedback's really rewarding, you know, because reviews, even if they're good, written by a book critic or a music critic, I have such an axe to grind with reviews in general. I mean, I know they're a necessary part of it, but it always just feels like, ugh, I don't. So, so to hear from real people, it's
I
kind
agree
of
with that.
like if you hated it, don't buy my next book, or I don't really need to. I don't really need to know. It's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna. That's not what's gonna make me better at this point. I am. But if the work that when and Dar Williams once said to me, because I said, well, if you accept the good, you got to take the bad, and blah blah blah. And she's like, yeah, I don't really see it that way. She said, I see it as like you put your bat signal up, and the people that are gonna get it and receive it will. And I think that's I think that's closer to the mark than the David Chase thing of like, you got to take the bad with the good. So I do none of it. Because I feel like it's important to know, we all want to feel like our work has mattered in some way in the world, like our life matters. So when someone reads your book and they let you know that it touched them, then that's good. I don't really need a fucking critique of chapter 5. You lost the plot here. I can talk about that with my editor or behind the scenes, but you don't need to put that in the newspaper. It's just like, I've had enough of it. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I just, when people go out and rip on a record or a book, it's just like, ugh, I don't know. I have a pretty down on that side of things. So the real people and those emails and the conversations and what did work for you, and you learn a lot by that. If everybody says the forgiveness chapter really touched me, and you keep hearing about the same chapters, which the good ones were. Nobody ever mentions certain songs that I've written. I'm aware that they're probably not doing as much work for me as other songs are.
Right.
I don't need. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all.
No, I was going to say that the plus, just to refer back to Shout It Out Loud. So one of the things that a lot of people were kind of mixed about at my publisher, with my editor, and also, as fans, is when I did each song and I described the song and then added like a fictional context to it. Some people hated it, some people loved it, but I knew it was taking a chance. When you're writing something and it's different, you're taking a chance. I mean, I've said this many times, and I know this is the kind of thing that everybody always says because it makes you feel okay if you do get shitty reviews, but nobody liked Moby Dick. Poe died of pauper. Van Gogh, no one bought any of his paintings. I mean, I don't mean to put like balm on our wounds, but I mean, that's a fact. Sometimes when you make those choices, you're going out
for it though. I mean, like I loved that. I loved that device that you used in this book.
Oh, thank you.
And when you started with Detroit Rock City and you were painting the picture, like I've never heard that song the same since. So I would have been on the pro side for that.
Oh, thank you. Well, the hurdle that I always do all the time, or I always try to traverse, is Elvis Costello's favorite line is, writing about music, it's like dancing about architecture. Right? I mean,
that's great.
In essence,
I love that.
In essence, it's a losing proposition before you even begin, right? Because you're supposed to listen to music, not read about it.
Right.
But to me, what makes me want to write about music, whether it's interviewing you for the Aquarian Weekly or the Huffington Post, or interviewing Adam, which is how he and I met through profession.
Yeah.
Or writing about Warren Zevon, who I loved when I was a kid, who had died, and got to meet his son and his daughter and his wife. And they thanked me as a family, his uncles and aunts, and they all wrote me that, because who's writing about Warren Zevon, right? It was my ability to go back and try to restructure the personality, the love of the person. I think that's when you're writing about music or dancing about architecture, what you're really doing here is you're celebrating the human aspect of it. Because we hear a song, it's great, we move on. But to know where it came from, to know the artist, to know how it affected the zeitgeist, to how it made us all feel, how it made us react, either in horror or joy or whatever it is, whether it's a film or a poem or a painting or a song, to me, that's what I get out of the writing process for me.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. And we've actually been on our experience tour, which winds down this week, but we've been doing deep dive Thursdays where we take an album and I just talk about the stories behind each song and
Fantastic.
how they came about. And it's been a blast. I mean,
I love that.
as our special guest, most weeks we've had like the producer of the album come in and kicking around memories. And I think for people, you know, the trick with me is these weren't hit records. So you know, I'm not going to write a book about it, but I'll sure do a show about it and have people for whom the record meant a lot tune in. That's been fun, you know?
Yeah.
Now,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just going to echo that.
I was going to say, so we probably have some authors tuned in, some writers themselves. So maybe, you know, I would like to, why don't we talk, let's do a little process. Like what would be a good thing to talk about here if there's anybody tuned in who's maybe working on something themselves or a writer themselves? I don't know. What could we chat about on that front?
Well, the one thing I always say, and I think you probably echoed this as well, is it's all about the discipline to me. You could try new things. You can work off the structure. Like I was always taught, you know, you learn the rules, you get it down, then you break them how you can. And that's number one. It's the discipline of using the craft, because I consider myself a craftsman, not an artist. I can craft. That's what I love to do. Craft a good sentence, craft a good paragraph, craft a good chapter, craft a good book, one step at a time. And so that's how I look at that. And the second thing is just the understanding the reader. This is an argument I've had with my wife, which is why I'm different than an artist, right? So my wife is a great artist. We have this argument all the time. She thinks that anything is art. If you're painting and you never take it out of the basement, that's art. You made it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to think that art becomes art when another person sees it or hears it or responds to it. It's a two-way street, which is what why is about. Art is a two-way street. I make it up. That's only half. You write a song, only half the job's done. Half. The other person gets it, hears it, gets moved by it, and that comes back to you, which is what I was saying before about an audience. For me as a writer, I'll give you an example why that's true. Every editor worth his salt, and I'm sure your editor did it as well, and I did it, is they say to you, James, Stephen, this point is good. I'm not getting it. You got to make it clearer so your reader gets it.
Right.
This chapter should not be here. It should be here because you're giving it away to the reader too soon. That needs to be there. It's always with the reader, the end game in mind. So those are two things that I would tell anybody with writing is the discipline of working in the structure, whatever you're doing. I don't care if it's a romance novel, a horror novel, music, and also the idea that you should never, ever forget that someone is going to have this book by their bedside and read it at night. Are they getting it? Are you getting your passion? Are you getting your point across?
Are you being clear? Yeah, I mean, and that
How do you feel about the art thing? How do you feel about the art versus craft thing?
Well, initially I was going to say that I probably fall more on the lines of your wife, you know, because so much that I do, because I've done a lot with people in mind, and I'll just say that it's not my best work, you know.
Fair point.
It hasn't gone the furthest in any capacity, you know. It's I've lost the plot on a lot of that stuff. But then your point about making it clearer for the reader is a good one, because it's because of knowing that there will be at least a reader that it becomes important to get clarity on the thoughts. And then when I read it back, I'm so pleased, you know, when I see certain sections in the book that I wrote that started out being a little messy and confusing and that kind of found their way back because we worked on them. I enjoy it so much more, you know, and with songs too, you know, you kind of think you have a good idea, but you play it in front of an audience and you realize it's not there yet, you know, and that's useful, you know, and I joke around about Love of My Life off the new record. I wrote that for Kirsten's 40th birthday and thought, I feel like wait till, you know, I played it for Kirsten. She loved it. And then I played it for an audience in Denver one night and they were like leaning in. First chorus, I could see people reaching, holding hands. And then it felt like inattention set in, you know, like it felt like I just wasn't happening. So I thought, well, Denver's a bunch of idiots. Let me try this in Des Moines. Tried it again. Same thing happened. And that's when I realized, okay, I've got a seed of something good, but I didn't have the song yet. And I went back and I kept rewriting that song until it finally felt like it achieved the desired effect. So, well, my initial thought was I would go with your wife because, I think you can make it, you could write a killer song that no one ever hears and it's still a killer song. Nothing in the world could change that. But the other person, and their experience with it does make it real. I don't know. It's a philosophical question. Like my brain I can't give you a straight answer.
Oh, that's a good answer, because there's no straight answer for that. But I will say this too. In my experience, I agree 100% with you. You should never do something just purely for the audience, because they can tell. Okay, a really good audience, a really good reader, a really good listener of a song can tell if you're just pandering. Which I've said to you before, you are amazing at walking that line between over sentimentality and realness. And it could go into maudlin, but it never does. You fishtail in and out of these really sentimental things, but it's never melodrama, and that is really impressive. Some people avoid all personal things at all costs, or they flower them up with a lot of metaphor and symbolism. You don't do that. So You're not pandering there, but you do. But people relate to that because some people have kids and some people have wives and girlfriends, and they go through hard times and they want to make money and all those different things you write about in Objects in the Mirror. They've lost a parent or a friend. All those things. But I agree with that 100%. But I'll give another example. In my very first book, Deep Tank Jersey, in 1995, came out in 96. Callaloo Press, a small press in Brooklyn, eventually put it out. But I had Simon & Schuster on the hook. They came and they sent editors out to work with me while I was on the road with this band. And I was sending them pages, and they said, you know what? You're really writing about this band. We got to stay in the moment. You got to stay. This is what readers want. They want to hear what these guys are going through. You keep putting in these personal sides about you lost your girlfriend and you miss your family and you're lonely and you're tired and no one cares, right? So I argued with them because I was a young snot, and I said, no, I'm going to not do this. And they dropped me. So I didn't have a publisher. Don't you know that book is 20 years old now? We had a big 20th anniversary in 2016, and because it came out in 96, right? 2016, is that 20 years? Yeah, right? What the hell? That's like 30 years, isn't it? What the hell was my math?
No, that's 20.
That's 20, right?
Yeah.
So we had this big party, and almost everybody that came up to me, they said, you know what my favorite parts of the book are? When you talk about the girl breaking up with you and you're missing your... So I was right. I did that for me, and I lost Simon & Schuster. It was a shitty business move, but I didn't do it just to please the editor. So there is a balance to what we were talking about, I think. Well,
and there's the question of who do you want to be? I was talking about this with my oldest daughter the other night. There's what do you want to do? The guy who makes the Avengers, and then there's the guy that makes the Florida Project or some great independent film, and I use those two examples because I think they came out the same year, like the Avengers and this great indie movie I loved called the Florida Project. And both these filmmakers made these movies, and they were like, I think both nominated for Best Picture. I could be talking shit, but there was some, and for me, I had this major epiphany of like, one does not wish to be the other. We out in the world use a certain metric to judge things. We say bigger is better, and like, having a movie that everybody knows the name of is better, but that's not necessarily the case. Like if you ask me truthfully, Stephen, would you rather have made the Avengers or the Florida Project? I would say the Florida Project. And that movie cost $1 million to make or something like that. And the other, whatever. I don't know. So, I think that is what happens in art too. And it's taken me a long time to accept, like, it's not because I was being Mr. Integrity that I turned down certain things. I just really didn't feel them. I didn't want to, like, I didn't have a desire to do certain things that probably could have moved me in a different direction. But because I feel the resistance in my soul, which
Right.
Sounds a little melodramatic, but it's true. You know, I just, there's just things I don't want to do. Um, no matter what they bring about. And so the goal as adults here is to not let others define our metrics or our standards on which we write books. You know, if you have a book you need to write or an album you need to make or something, the challenge is to just do it and make it. And if you hire people to help you make it, producers or editors, you know, it's to take them seriously and let them help you, advise you, and push back enough when you really disagree, but also realize when they're, you know, if you say, this is where I want to go. I mean, this is taking me a long time to get to, but it's like, I now hire a producer and say, this is where I want to go. I don't care where you want me to go. This is where I want to go. What do you think? And if they go, cool, I can help you get where you want to go, then I say, you're hired. And then when I'm being a total pain in the ass, I tell them in the beginning, feel free to say to me, Stephen, I'm helping you get where you told me you wanted to go. And I go, oh yeah, thanks for putting me in my place. Like that is a healthy push and pull to me, you know? And that's the difference between, you were right. You wrote the book you needed to write. And I think, but yeah, maybe it cost you a deal with those publishers, and you know, that says a bit about just who you are. You know, it's not good or bad, really. It's just who you are, you know.
And if I may, as an addendum to that story, the 50-something-year-old James Campion would have taken that out and took the business deal with Simon and Schuster.
Yeah, I know.
I was too young and stupid for that, but I was right. I made the right choice creatively, but the wrong choice professionally.
Well, and maybe the 50-year-old James Campion or the 43-year-old Stephen Kellogg, when I think of my first record on Universal and similar kind of pushbacks, like you might also have been able to better articulate why you felt it was beneficial, and maybe there was a way to work it in, because, you know, as much as we love clear-cut us versus them situations, and we're living in a world full of them right now, there aren't that many. It's not that way. It's not that simple most of the time. It's usually like they may have had a good foundation. You know, they're trying to help you write a sellable book. And if you got, you know, as adults, if you work through it, I think there's ways. I look back at opportunities I had, and I think I could have better articulated now, hey, I'd like to keep trying this because, you know, are you open to that? You know,
Right.
Yes, we're open to it, but if we don't like, you know, look for allies. There's a lot of ways to handle these damn situations. But my 20s and 30s, you know, were certainly not, I didn't always know how to handle it, you know, and so, so you have memories, you have stories, you have.
Yeah, I remember, I'm so old now that I remember 32 seeming like ridiculously old to be published for the first time. I felt like I really wasted a lot of my 20s, but now I think back and I'm like, shit, I know a lot of people who have never been published or don't get published until after that. So I was happy to be published then. I was happy to throw my hat in the ring, but I would say two things before we break, because I don't know how long I'm going to go, but this is so much fun.
Yeah,
two things I got to know from you, okay?
Yep.
The first thing is I had an editor. Most of my professional life, I've had an editor heaped on me, whether it's a magazine, a newspaper, or in the cases of my books. I've been really fortunate that 99.9% of them have all been great. I've heard horror stories about editors. I've had arguments back and forth with editors. Editors have kowtowed to me. I've kowtowed to them. Like you said, there's that gray area. But I've been very lucky because it wasn't like I picked them. So you get to pick a producer in music, and I don't know if you picked an editor for this book, but if you did pick an editor for this book, did you feel like that's the kind of person I know who can deal with the kind of thing I'm making? Because I don't necessarily think that the publisher always thinks that in the case of my book. They're just like, this woman is free, this guy is free, let's give him to James and let them finish.
I would imagine that would be very difficult, and had I not been sort of, you know, serendipitously connected with the editor I was connected with, I don't know that I would have a book, you know, and I'll never forget what Carol did in that sense. But I had early on, I was maybe going to do this with a small publisher. And at the end of the day, our arrangement didn't feel right. But the great thing that came out of that was they said, you should talk to Carol Stanley out in Los Angeles. And Carol was just the right mix of tough love, but she wasn't. This was not a woman who was in it for the cash. We were just. And I knew. I mean, as I increasingly was financing my own operation, I thought, well, the benefits of financing your own operation are you can really hold yourself to your own standards for good or for bad, and so that's how we wound up. And I would imagine if I got assigned, I would like to work with a publisher on the next record, on the next book, because I think that I'd like to have some partners in helping to sell the book. I really believe in this book right now. I see it doing a lot of good. I want it to be able to reach people, and we're operating very much from the hip like we always do. So if I found myself on a publisher and was put with an editor, I think I would, it would either work or it wouldn't. Like, I do have a sense that there are editors for whom we could not be right for each other. And
right, it's just the way it is in the world. And I would just say also the plus of course, with working with a publisher, a big one or a medium-sized one. Mine is Backbeat Books now, which has just been bought out by Little Field and Roland and Littlefield. And, they've got a major operation, distribution, connections to libraries, all the books, they can get them out there. But the other thing is they base your book on size, page count, and everything else, because, this takes up how much space on a shelf. This weighs how many in a box. They base a lot of it on that. I don't mean to, this is true of every publisher. It's a business and commerce. They base your advance on that. So for the Zevon book, I signed a contract for 75,000 word book. It ended up being 120,000. I fought with them to make it close to 100 just because all the interviews were coming in and I was having a ball creating this thing.
Yeah.
And they said, you have May to get rid of 20,000. We'll give you 100,000 words, with 20,000 words got to go in 1 month. Otherwise, we're taking them out. So I had this, that was the worst May of my whole life. It was a cathartic, painful experience. It was like expunging all the hell inside of me to get that out. But it made it a better book. But it only comes because of a publisher.
I'm sure that was tough, but when you tell me about, that sounds fun to me. That would be the next phase of, I would love to do something like that. Having said that, when I write books, and never say never, this size and kind of vibe, this is the type of book I'm frequently trying to find in the world, something that will not feel too daunting, but feel substantial enough. And I'm like, that is so this is actually going to kind of be one of my things as an author. That's going to be one of my true norths. I'm not going to write huge books, and I'm not going to write pamphlets. I'm going to write books that people pick up and go, wow, I can't believe I read that in 4 days. Those are going to be the types of books I'm going to write, and that's, even learning that about myself, that's exciting. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. But now that I have it, I'm like, ooh, I want a series of Kellogg books that are all kind of bing, 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 and have, that's.
I can almost tell you how many, I saw your font and how you have I can almost tell you how many words this book is, just from experience. But getting back, the last thing I wanted to ask you, and you could throw one at me before we're done, because I'm really enjoying myself. But so I often quote this with a lot of people, and it's one of those things I totally, totally believe of any creative person. I think this quote is attributed to Picasso. That's the first person I heard say it or quoted. He said, a painting is not finished, it's abandoned. And so I've never read any of my books when they're done. And I've heard filmmakers say that. And I'm like, what? You don't go and sit in a theater and watch the movie? You work your ass off on this thing. But I get it. Because all they see is everything they can't change anymore. Every cut, every line. Think about what that must do to a filmmaker up on a giant screen. I mean, it's tough. I don't know the way you feel that way when you're making a record or writing a book, but I'll tell you, I can't look. To me, I almost feel like I want to go back and change something else. And you can't. It's over. Move on.
Totally. I mean, records are that way. And I made enough records at this point. If you're having an unpleasant experience listening to one of your own records, I just put it down, and stop listening to it. I have a few albums I haven't listened to in long, long time. And
do Do you read have you read this book in its form like this?
I have, yeah, and I actually found it really satisfying. Like it was. I read it through. We found 2 typos. They're real small, and so we just the book comes out in a couple of weeks, but we just ordered a second printing, and so we got the typos fixed and added some discussion questions at the back of the book for book clubbing and stuff like that, because we were getting people that want, there's things to talk about after you've read the book. It just sort of evoke conversation. So
sure it does, yeah.
So we're gonna do that, and I think maybe it's the naivete of first-time author, but that was a pleasing experience. I was horrified the first time I read it through because I was just afraid we were gonna they printed a wrong page or something,
Right.
But once I read it through, it was really exciting. And there are a few sections that don't entirely work, like that, it's just that didn't quite get there. But I also don't think of myself as an artist at this point. I feel like I want to build a life. I'm not trying to be Ernest Hemingway. I'm not trying to be Bob Dylan. I want to have a life. I want to show people how to have a life. I want to do this job that I adore of speaking and singing and writing. And so that means sometimes things are going to be less than perfect. And I don't want to be sloppy, but I felt like, all right, I did the work. This book is done. I printed it. I can't do more until this, I was eager with the second printing. I said, all right, fix these typos, please. And we made an adjustment on the cover, just a slight adjustment that I think will give it a little more symmetry for my OCD. But that's it, and so James, before we let you go, I would ask you the same question then. Are you able to look back and feel pride in the work that you've done? Is there any part of it that is worrisome or torturesome, but you're building a legacy here? So what would you say, how much enjoyment do you get from your body of work?
Well, aside from being, wanting to play in the NFL when I was 6, really the only thing.
I can see you've got the build for it.
Oh, yeah. As my father said to me one day, I remember my late dad, he said to me, you need size, strength, and speed to play football. And you don't have any of those. Which was nice of him to say. He laid it down for me, and he was right. I almost got killed my freshman year of high school, so that was out of the window. But the only thing I ever really wanted to do was write. I remember Stan Lee's book, Origins of Marvel Comics, and Stan was the first guy to articulate to me in that book that there is an achievement to having something that came out of your head on someone's nightstand.
Mm-hmm.
They look at it, and it comes out of this thing and goes into their heads and creates a whole new thing that maybe you didn't even think about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. The second thing for me is Hunter Thompson once said to me, and he said this in interviews as well, there is no writer's class. We don't have a class. We're just disparate all over the place. But I disagree with that. I think all of us that have had the printed word and is going to be in the Library of Congress, I'm not saying I'm Kurt Vonnegut, and you said before I'm not going to try to be Hemingway or Dylan. I've always looked at it this way. There is already a Dylan, okay? There's already a Hemingway. But those guys, Dylan was trying to be Woody Guthrie, and and Hemingway was trying to be, someone else somewhere down the line. So we always have those influences and everything else. But I feel the proudest I am is being a writer. People ask me what I am, no matter what I'm doing in my life, even when I didn't have anything published. I'm a writer. I just haven't got there yet. So I tip my hat to you with all the love and all the respect, because I'm so happy you went through this, and just be a small part, however much you put on me, to see what you did. You're in the writer's class now, brother.
Oh man. Well, that's what I wanted to. I wanted to be able to do that. So thank you, James. And thanks for coming on today. Folks tuning in, we're going to have how to get James's books and pre-order of my book. We're shipping them now too. We'll have all that down there.
You're signing them too, because on my website we sign them and ship them out for free.
We ship them from our website. Yeah, that's like the bonus for if you get them from us.
Good.
But we got it all, and this is my dear friend James Campion. Thank you for tuning in with us for Author to Author. Thanks to Lee for recording it all, and we will look forward to seeing you again and sharing a chat with you again soon. James, I love you, buddy. Thanks for tuning in, man.
Stay safe. Best of the girls.
All right. Bye-bye.